Hello, this is Rob again, and I wanted to do a video about being an Enneagram 1. There's a lot of YouTubers out there that talk about it, and only a few of them themselves are Enneagram 1s, and I think they do a really good job about discussing, the motivations and the drives and stuff like that. But I feel like a lot of people who talk about the Enneagram and are not a 1, they miss some of the nuances. And this is on YouTube, this is in books, everything that I've seen. Now, I am a Enneagram 1 wing 9. I'm also an INFP. Um, so these are all from my perspectives, but I believe these are probably universal. Don't quote me on that because I did work with another Enneagram 1 and I did not like that guy. So what I wanted to talk about first and foremost is when I hear a lot about the Enneagram 1, the statement is they need to be right. And that's a misnomer. I think a lot of people, when they hear they need to be right, they think of them as being what's called a right fighter, which it doesn't matter what the topic is, doesn't matter the opinion or anything like that. I have to be the one who's right, which means you have to be the one that's wrong. And that's not the correct way to explain it. What it means, it's more that Enneagram ones, they want to find the correct way. So they want to find the correct way to do something. They want to find the correct way to be. They want to find the correct way to engage with the world, and they want to find the right way for the world to exist. So it doesn't mean they can't change their mind or come up with something else. It just means they want to look for that, whether or not it's something that they know in the moment or something that comes in the future. But they do want to find that right way, and it can be in big things, could be in little things. But it's wanting to be right with the world versus I'm always going to be right. I think that's a little bit more like maybe like a type 8 kind of mentality. But again, I'm not a type 8. I'm a type 1, so I'm just talking about that. One of the reasons, when I think about wanting to be right, and wanting to do right and wanting to do the right things, um, one of the things that comes to my mind. No, Spider-Man is not considered an Enneagram 1. Captain America is, but I think when you think about Spider-Man's origin story, that is a very, very it relates to being what's about being right. So in the origin story, Spider-Man gets his powers, he starts using them for his own benefit and good. And one day there's a criminal that runs by him after doing a wrestling show, and he could have very easily stopped this criminal, but he didn't. He let him run by, and basically like, well, it's not my job. Um, and then later that criminal ended up killing Uncle Ben. And so the whole with great responsibility comes, or great power comes great responsibilities. That whole thing is there. And the reason why I bring this up is because, there's theories in the Enneagram that we're all born to our healthy side. So, like for an Enneagram 1, we're born to a healthy 7. The world's wonderful. The world's got all this magic and it's safe and wonderful. And something smacks us one way or another, and then that makes us go to 1. We realize that the world is not safe. And so I think a lot of us have a situation like this where, something didn't go, or because we felt something happened, we got smacked, we got slapped one way or another. And that caused us to go, okay, I've got to do this. I've got to do all these things in order for the world to be right and for the world to be correct. Um, Another thing that I've seen is they talk about um, how type 1s see a lot of things that are wrong with the world. And I think most of us would be like, yeah, I see things wrong all the time. The best way that I can think of to explain this to someone who's not a type 1 is, excuse me, when you go into like a nasty uh, bathroom at a gas station, obviously not a Buc-ee's, but somewhere else, and you just see everything that's just nasty in there. You see, no toilet paper, toilet bowl's not clean, there's no hand wash stuff like that. You see all of that. Now, as an Enneagram 1, it's like that all the time. And like another example I can give is, I'm, this is a somewhat newer house that I live in. And we've taken some stuff off the wall. So there's like holes in the wall. And it's been a while since we've taken care of them because we want to paint and all these other things. Now, my wife, who's not an Enneagram 1, she can see the holes and just keep walking and go on her day. But for me, every time I walk past those holes, I see them as, okay, there's holes in the wall. And, and I said I was going to paint, and then I said I was going to fill these holes. And I know now it's been 6 months, and look at how lazy I've been. And I haven't taken care of this yet. And like again, that's every time I see those holes. I can't let that go. Um, so that brings us to the inner critic, the discussion in our minds all the time, and everybody is critical of themselves. Um, but we are. And that was one thing, and I talked about working with another Enneagram 1, and that was one thing I tried to convince him that we were very much alike, and he just wouldn't have it. He just wouldn't hear it. There's no way that we're anything alike. Um, but one thing that we definitely would both say is like, nobody can criticize me as hard as I criticize myself. And I would have to give this guy annual reviews and stuff like that. And those were always very difficult, but I understood his side of it. So it was never a criticism. It was you know, what's bothering you, what's not working right, what can we do together to make it better? So it was a knack there. But yes, we do have this strong inner critic. And we're not trying to get things right for our own ego. I've seen that in a couple other books that, we like being the school marm, we like being, it makes us feel superior because we think we're right. It's not that. Um, we just know that there is a better way to do things, and not know, but we believe that there is, and we think we can find it. And I've got a great example of that is I had two bills to pay. They both came in the mail. They were both kind of a little bit odd bills. One was a medical bill, the other one was a pest control bill for a special service. And both bills, you open them up, they both said, at the beginning, go to this website to pay this bill. And so I sat down to pay both of them. I looked at the medical bill. It said, okay, this is a website to go to. I typed in the website. It said, okay, give me these three pieces of information. Here they are on your bill. This is what they look like. This is what we're looking for. Type those in there. It said, this is how much you owe. I'm like, okay, that's correct. Detailed information there. How would you like to pay? I want to pay with my debit card. Boom, bam, bam. Very simple, very easy, like it should be. And so then I went to the pest control bill. Same thing. They said, go to this website. So I went to the website, and it was just their standard website. And there was no pay my bill, anything like that. So I had to search around for a while. The only thing I could really see that would maybe move me forward is to sign in. Well, I didn't create the account. My wife had created the account. So I had to go find my wife, get all that information, come back, type that in. And even after I logged in, it was not easy to find where to pay for this special service, because I had to renew it within a certain period of time. So I finally found it, finally paid it, but it was much more complicated. I don't feel like I should ever have to log in somewhere to pay you money. And I don't feel like I should have to do all this other stuff. So, you know, I'm getting very frustrated with this second bill, especially after I paid the first one. Everything was so easy. Now, if this was like a small mom and pop pest control, I would get it. They don't have a lot of resources to make an effective bill. So I could give them a pass there. But this is one of the largest pest control companies where around where I live, boards, advertisement all over the place. They could have made this website much simpler, much easier. And so they talk about the type 1 anger or frustration. This was an example of where I was getting very frustrated with the second bill, not because of necessarily all the extra steps, but because all the extra steps were unnecessary. They could have made it very easy. They could have done it just like the other one, but now they've made it more difficult. And that means it's sucked up my time because they didn't make it easier. And there was somebody else, another one that was talking about they had a relative that was trying to do something in their car, and that relative was becoming very frustrated with it because it wasn't an easy swap out. And, you know, from a type 1, I know that feeling because as you're trying to like connect wires and everything, you're thinking, why don't they just have automatic connectors that are universal across all cars? So you can put this in, these wires hit here, these wires hit there, these wires hit there. So that's some of the examples of where, as a type one, we see something and we see something that's wrong. We see something that could have been better. We feel like they should have made it better. They should have all come together and made this decision to make it better and make it easier for those of us who actually have to do the work because it's sucking up our time. Um, and so that leads me into another part. I'm kind of skipping around from my order here a little bit. Um, but I want to talk about um, permission to rest. That is a big thing for a number one. We feel like we're not allowed to rest till everything's taken care of, till, the bills are paid, till the house is clean, till the lawn is mowed, till, we can't leave work until we know the building is locked up, because we're the only ones who are going to stay and lock it, that kind of a thing. And so there's a real big permission to rest. And even when we do rest, there is that critic in our head going, well, you could go do this. You still got this to do. How about this? Why don't you go do that? Why aren't you doing that? And so there is this sense that you have to earn rest. You have to earn the ability to relax. You have to earn the ability to, um, you know, not not have to take care of everything. And so along that line, one of the things, you know, at my most recent position, my boss would say, it's very hard to compliment you. And I get why it's hard to compliment me because, there's things that I don't feel I should get complimented for, like things that I'm supposed to do, like, showing up to work on time. I shouldn't have to be complimented because that's what you're supposed to do. Doing my job is not something that I feel I need should be complimented for. If you compliment me for something that I feel I should be doing, it feels hollow. It feels unearned in a sense. It feels almost guilty to be complimented for something that I should be doing. And along that line, and again, type one, that everyone should be doing. There should be no reason why somebody's late to work all the time. Um, now, so it's not easy for me to be complimented that way. So during one of my reviews with him, he said, I need you to figure out how to compliment you, how to reward you in a sense. And it took a while. And really where the best reward that came from was I had planned a fall festival. We had a lot of transition going on at work, and I wanted to do the fall festival like we normally do because I wanted some sense of normalcy for everybody. We had done it the past couple of years, but a lot of people that have been involved with it, not there anymore, had different things. So basically, through my own sheer will of force, I got the fall festival together. Um, and it wasn't a small feat. So, I'm there early in the morning, setting up stuff, getting things loaded, getting things in place, getting everything going. And, I'm obviously working it through the whole event. And then at the end, we start tearing it down. And it's a long day for me, and I'm sweating and I'm hot and everything. And my boss said to me, "You've done enough. You can go home. We'll take care of the rest." And on the way home, it hit me. I said, that's it. That's what I need. I need someone to tell me that I've done enough, that I've earned my rest, and that, you get to go do it. So to me, that's the compliment. And it's, and an example of that would be when you go on vacation. Say, hey, go enjoy your vacation. Don't worry about us. We've got it here. And then have it taken care of. So when I get home or come back to work, I'm not having to work 3 weeks to catch up for all the things that got dropped during the week that I was off. That definitely seems to be a trend. Um, I think another thing that I wanted to talk about that I think I know is for me, and maybe it's for most Enneagram ones. I hope it is. Please let me know. Um, there's a feeling of a higher standard is required of a type one, and there's an unjust penalty um, for the type one. And An example of that, would be again at work. Um, if I don't stay and make sure that the building is locked up properly, that all the doors are closed, all the doors are locked, all the alarms and everything like that are not tripped, everything's good. I don't bypass anything and I lock the door and I leave. Um, that my point is that if I don't do that, something bad's going to happen. It's either going to, I'm going to get in trouble for it because it didn't get completed, or that, God forbid, that's going to be the night that somebody breaks in and steals something. But the sense is that if somebody else doesn't do that, or somebody else, well, I can't get this door shut, I'm just going to bypass that alarm and I'm going to set the alarm after that, and they go, that the same stuff's not going to happen to them, that they're not going to get in trouble for it. The police isn't, the alarm's not going to go off, nothing's going to get stolen. So I know for me, there's a sense that if I don't do all of this, there will be a penalty, and that penalty will be greater than what it is for anybody else who creates the same or does the same infraction. And I hate to say it, but I feel like life has continued to show me that lesson, of times where, I have feel that I have been unfairly penalized for doing the same or not doing it as bad as some other people. And it feels like other people tend to get away with a lot more. And, again, that could be the universe, just smacking me. But I think to me, there's something about that. Um, Another thing that I've heard somebody talk about is gifts for a type one and their love language for a type one. Um, Usually when people talk about type ones, when it comes to gifts, they talk about, acts of service maybe, or they talk about, that's their love language, acts of service or praise. And I think the caveat in a lot of this is, again, it's what a type one, um, what's important to that individual type one. And so, like an example would be, like I I don't care about lawn maintenance. you know. So, if somebody says, "Hey, I'm going to go mow the lawn for you," I'm not going to be critical of how well they mow the lawn. But, painting inside of a room, that's something that's more important to me. So I tend to be more critical of that. So if somebody were to say, "Hey, I'm going to go paint that room for you," even though it's an act of service, it wouldn't be a good one for me because of, how important that is to me and how critical that is. I don't think that's a good example. Let me think of something else. The the act of let's go back to words of affirmation. Um, Again, like I said before, there is a struggle with praising type one. Type one, again, they need to feel that, praise for something that they don't feel is praiseworthy is almost embarrassing, almost makes them uncomfortable, makes me uncomfortable. Like an example, again, from work, doing what's a normal amount of work, I don't think needs to be praised. It's, my responsibility to get this stuff done, and I don't think that needs to be praised. But on the flip end, one time at where I was working, I had undercover, I uncovered theft going on. Employees coming in and stealing material that had a high price on the open market. And it took a lot for me to discover that. First, I had to correct some accounting practices that they did that started to show a discrepancy. I started to track down why that discrepancy was happening. I started to do, I did a bunch of stuff to discover this discrepancy. And, even to the point of dealing with the police and the district attorney to get this person convicted. And, the company as a whole, they gave me a token, that they give out to a lot of people. But because of the nature of what happened, They didn't put it in the newsletter like they did for everybody else. And even when it came time at the end of the year banquet for the whole company, where they have a segment where they talk about this, I had to remind them that, hey, I got one. I should be included on this list. And it's just because everybody wanted to kind of sweep it under the table. And so there was something that I had done that I felt I went very much above and beyond, very proud of, but I wasn't getting a level of affirmation I felt for it. And that really bothered me on the flip end. So, that's going to be one of the problems of dealing with a type one is that you need to understand what's important to them and when they think something is big. And so that would be something that, with a partner or something like that, I would ask those questions. Like when they definitely bring something to you and go, "Hey, look what I did," that's big. So that gives you a clue. But if they're just kind of doing the things, you can thank them, give them a kiss, but you don't have to sit there and go, "Wow, you did a really great job," because they had planned on doing a good job for it. Um, the gifts again, it's a hard one because you don't know exactly what's important, and quite honestly, in my life, I don't like getting gifts, um, because and this may sound god awful, but at times I feel like people don't really know me when they get me a gift. Like, I have specific interests, and um, so people will get me something that's involved with that interest, but that maybe it always feels like that's part of that interest that I'm not that interested in. Or so if it's if I need a gift, it kind of goes back, or if I need something, it kind of goes back to what I said before. I need to be told that I've done enough and it's time to rest. And, like something I was thinking along this line is like, well, how about getting somebody a massage? That's time to go separated, go sit and enjoy yourself, rest while you're getting this massage. That sounds like a great idea, but as how my mind goes, you get in there, you pay for an hour, you get in there, it's about, they open up the door right at the top of the hour. You go in there, it's about 10, 15 minutes before they're actually ready to get started. Because you got to get undressed, you got to get under the covers. They want you to like be there with the music, and then they gotta, do their thing. Um, and then, if it's not a fantastic massage, um, my mind's going, well, man, they really didn't hit that leg, or they spent more time on this leg than that leg, or they really didn't hit what I was looking for. And then, at about 10:02, they stop. So the actual massage is only about, 40 minutes, maybe 45 minutes. And that's the kind of thing that kind of sits with me and goes, man, that was nice, but it wasn't a great experience because of all these little things that seem to be wrong with it. Let's see, is there anything else that I've come across that I think really um, has been kind of missed with the type one? Um, Type ones, we honestly do care. Um, and we do believe that things can be better, and we think that things people should strive for things to be better, because it just makes it easier on all of us. Again, the version of the two bills. When I paid the doctor bill, it was sweet how that thing just lined up, and you see that, and that's possible. And then you deal with the pest control bill that's all this hindrance and all this burden and all this expense, and it's like, you've sucked up my time, and now I have less time to complete things in so that I can earn the opportunity to rest. And if everybody did do their part and did everything to the degree that they needed to be. If everybody picked up their garbage at the end of a movie, or that, they return their groceries, like if they don't want something, don't leave the ice cream in the middle of the pasta aisle, take it back. And I know there's people out there, well, there's people who are paid to do that. Well, again, that's somebody else's time. You said that my time's more important than that person's time, and I think that's part of the problem. Um, and I think, as type ones, we see that kind of stuff, and it bothers us. And there was another video that I watched, and this there's actually a couple points. God, this is going to be a 20-hour video. Um, there was a pastor talking about Enneagram 1. And he's like, oh, we love to employ Enneagram 1s. If you need something done, they'll get it done. They'll take care of it. And he's like, and we need those kind of people. We need people who will pay their taxes. And my instant thought is like, what? Why doesn't everybody have to pay their taxes in a sense? Why is that, we're the ones who pay the taxes. We're the ones taking on the burden for everyone else. And granted, that's not exactly what he was meaning, but I think there's a big truth in that. And a lot of that's a big truth for the frustration and the anger that a type one has, is that there is a sense of an overburden on us because other people aren't, you know, doing as much as they can to do it correctly or do it right. I've had a thing. Nobody's ever going to outwork me, and it's usually because I'm having to clean up everybody else's mess. And so that's one part of it. And another thing that I heard, because they talk about Enneagram ones being micromanagers, being um, critical and criticizing. And somebody was talking about giving a speech, and that they had ran long in the speech, and one of their friends who's Enneagram 1 came up and said, man, that was a great speech. I think it's great that you're able to run over. I could never do that. And the person who was giving the speech said, ooh, that was their little backhanded way of saying, you went long, and got in their face. And I'm listening to that, and I'm like, no, that's not what that meant. That meant that it's nice that you have the permission and the universe and the world and everything to be able to do that. If I was giving a speech and I had a cutoff time and I went long, I would get spanked for it. I would get slapped. Something would happen that, the person orchestrating it would come up and complain about it. Somebody else would complain, or an opportunity that I could have had um, is not going to happen anymore. And so it's not a criticism that the other person ran long. It was saying, man, I wish I had the freedoms and the karma of the world to be able to get away with things that it appears most people can. And I get that I said appears, so but um, one last thing that I want to talk about, and this isn't a fully formed idea, is the concept of anger. They talk about the Enneagram and each one having their sins that they've got to deal with. Um, and the Enneagram one, our deal is anger, and it usually comes out in frustration because anger is bad. I had a father who would blow up, and so as a young child, I'm like, I'm not going to do that. So, I would repress a lot of my anger, and it would come out as frustration because, I'm doing all this stuff, and everybody else gets to see him to go run in the fields and, chase butterflies. Well, I've got to sit here and, you know, into the garden in order to be able to make sure that everybody eats. Um, and so one book that I read said, well, the key thing is getting in touch with your anger and learning how to process your anger. And that's almost a flippant sentence to say because we don't know how to process our anger. We've held it in, we've repressed it. And quite honestly, anger is a sense of unfairness. And now, I'm sure you could say, well, then just change your mind of what's being fair and just realize that the world's unfair. Um, but it's hard to to let go of that and to sense it. I mean, it's because I believe for a lot of us, we see repeated patterns of it being unfair. If you have two children and you give one children the big piece of cake and the other one the small piece of cake, the one who's getting the small piece of cake is going to scream, that's unfair. And you can tell them, hey, life's unfair and all that kind of stuff. But if it keeps happening over and over and time again, that the one who keeps getting the smaller portions is going to get angry about it. And, it's going to have to come out because it is an external thing. Um, and, so that's something that I've been struggling with is how to, cope and deal with that anger. Um, because writing letters, burning things, punching a punching bag isn't necessarily enough it just lets a little steam off the kettle. It doesn't turn off the heat to the kettle. Um, and so that's it. That's what I've got. I'm sure I ran quite longer than I expected to. I appreciate it if you hung out this long. I honestly don't expect you to, but I needed to get these things out. I'm not looking to make a bunch of videos, but this was just something over months of hearing and listening and reading that I'm just like, I just don't feel like these people who aren't type ones understand what a type one is. And I couldn't explain what a type six is. I couldn't explain, even though I've got a nine wing, I couldn't explain a nine. I couldn't explain what a nine experienced in their life to become a nine versus, I understand what I experienced that made me become a one. Um, and so that's the purpose of this video. I hope you got something out of it. Again, I needed just to get that stuff out. So thank you very much for watching, and I'll talk to you later.